Well, hello everyone. My name is Magda Joshi. I'm a member of the Philanthropy, Engagement and Partnerships team at UWCA Atlantic, and will have the pleasure of moderating today's session. We are delighted to be hosting the first Atlantic Circle InConversation event of the year, welcoming Ruth Holton-Hodson from the class of 77 as our guest speaker. Before I hand over to Ruth, I just wanted to outline a few points. The session will last about 60 minutes, during which Ruth will present, and then we'll have some time for questions from you. So feel free to post them throughout the talk in the chat. We'll come back to the questions in the last part of the event. If you would like to, just so we know who we're interacting with, you are welcome to rename yourselves on Zoom by putting your name and possibly also your affiliation to the college. As you can see, the event is being recorded, and so if you'd rather not be featured, feel free to turn off your camera. Throughout Ruth's talk, I would be grateful if you could please stay on mute so we can clearly hear the presentation. And then to turn to our guest today, as I said, we are delighted to be hosting Ruth Holton-Hodson, who will talk to us today about solar cookers and their multiple applications based on her research and experience. Ruth is our alumna from the class of 77. She holds a master's degree in educational administration from the University of Chicago and has 35 years of experience as a consumer and health policy advocate, serving in executive positions in government, philanthropy, and nonprofits. Notably, between 2008 and 2019, Ruth served as a deputy to California Controller and then Treasurer John Chang. She also spent almost 10 years at the California Wellness Foundation as a special projects director and then director of public policy focused on increasing access to healthcare in low-income communities. Currently, Ruth serves as vice president of the board of Solar Cookers International and the vice chair of the board of the California Budget and Policy Center. She is also an artist. Ruth, without further ado, I hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Magda, and hello to all, and a special shout out to my classmates. Thank you for joining the conversation today. When I heard the first Atlantic conversation, I thought, what a great venue to spread the word about solar cookers and the extraordinary impact that they can have in the world's poorest regions. I was first introduced to solar cookers years ago when I heard about the small organization, Solar Cookers International, based where I live in Sacramento, California. I was really taken by the simplicity of the technology, which could do so much to better human health, particularly women's health and the environment. 4 years ago, I was asked to join the board, and now I'm the board vice president. My goal today is to give a brief primer on what solar cookers are, the multitude of benefits for human and environmental health, and an overview of the solar cooking movement and how you can get engaged. So, we don't want to go to the bottom of the presentation. So, what is a solar cooker? Simply put, they are devices that capture the free energy of the sun through the use of reflective surfaces to cook food and pasteurize water. Here are several sort of the key types of solar cookers. You've got here in the corner the very basic reflective panel. This is made of cardboard with aluminum foil. And then you have the solar box oven, and that's great for actually baking, among other things. And that can be built to contain several pots. In both cases, the light from the sun creates a diffuse heat, making them good for slow cooking, like stews, rice, and bean dishes. Sweet potatoes cooked this way are particularly delicious. Just pop them in the pot, no water needed, and an hour later, a perfect potato. The parabolic reflector here in the corner directs the sunlight onto the pan, making the surface much hotter and enabling grilling and frying. You can't see it here, but there's another picture I'll show you later, where there's a bar that runs across the center, and then in the middle is a disc that you can, a ring, in fact, that you can put the frying pan on or the pot. The Fresnel lens here, which can be made, the Fresnel mirror and the Fresnel lens, which can be made from glass or plastic, functions very much like a magnifying glass. You might remember when you were a kid and you took a magnifying glass and you put it on the ground, focusing the sunlight on a particular point. So it gets very hot very quickly. The solar array cooker, here's an example of one from Nepal, has mirrored reflectors that are flat panels, so it doesn't require the complex curve shape of a parabolic and can still reach temperatures typical of parabolic cookers. The metal frameworks to hold the mirrors can be assembled by craftspeople with basic welding skills. Think of the parabolic, the lens, and the mirrored models as the stovetop versus a box-style cooker, or the reflective panel cooker is like an oven. There are hundreds of variations of these types available, both by manufacturers all over the world. Also, I'll note, it does not have to be hot outside to cook with a solar cooker. You just need the sun. So you can, in fact, cook with snow on the ground. And we have a volunteer in Minnesota who often solar cooks in the middle of winter. There are also institutional solar cookers. The world's largest solar steam cooking system is designed by the Gadi Solar Energy Systems and is at the Shirdi Sai Baba Temple in Shirdi, Maharashtra, where they serve up to 50,000 people per day. The dishes concentrate sunlight on receivers that contain water, generating steam that is piped down to the kitchen for cooking purposes. To maintain constant focus with the sun, the dishes automatically rotate throughout the day after being manually aligned once each morning. The solar steam cooking system, and here you can see it in the center slide here, the solar steam cooking system is actually retrofitted to existing liquid petroleum gas-powered boilers that are still used in the evening and during prolonged periods of bad weather. While the technology was originally developed in Germany, the equipment does not contain imported components and is manufactured with local machinery and labor. So how do solar cookers work? Basically, they capture the sunlight through a variety of reflective surfaces, as you can see on the slide. This one happens to be mine, and then directs it into a black surface where it is converted to heat. One of our members has actually made one using the shiny inside of crisp packets. To make sure that the cooker is properly directed, what you do is you stand, you can just barely see my shadow here, but you stand in front of the sun, and then the shadow is supposed to fall directly over the cooking area. And that means it's where it's cooking at its most efficient. So with this one, and I have a shady yard, so I have to move this about every hour or two to make sure that I'm maximizing the sun. And as you can see, the sorts of reflective surfaces: aluminum, mylar, chromium paint, glass mirrors, plastic mirrors. It is important to note, though, that you don't want to be looking at the reflective surface too closely because you can really hurt your eyes. Here you can see a little diagram of how the sun hits the, in this case, parabolic cooker, and then bounces off and then hits the pot, which is sitting on that center ring. So how do they work? You've actually all experienced what it's like to be food in the pot. I'm sure all of you have sat in a car with black seats with the windows rolled up on a sunny day. And that's exactly how it works. You use dark pots, as I said, and the pots are sort of elevated on the bottom. And what's really important, though, is to make sure that you're retaining the heat. So here, in this case, you have glass bowls that are around the pot. It can be plastic, anything that helps retain the heat. So in fact, creates a steam to help with the cooking. So you need a really tight lid for that. And so how long does it take for food to cook? Under normal conditions, the temperatures are hot enough to fully cook food, but not so hot as to dry out the food or damage the healthful nutrients. Also, many foods can cook for several hours without overcooking. In the States here, we have crock pots. It operates very much along those principles, which allows the food to be placed in the cooker early in the day and left into mealtime without needing to be stirred or monitored, which is hugely important for all the women cooking around the world who then frees up time for them to do other things. Since there is no direct heat source at the bottom of the pot, the food doesn't burn, nor does it need to be stirred, which is great. So how long does it take to cook? It can be as fast as any other types of cooking if you're using a parabolic cooker, for example, and it also depends obviously on the time of day and the conditions of the day and the type of solar cooker. How do you keep food warm, or what do you do on a cloudy day? So some solar cookers have heat retention and are backup power sources, so they have electricity. But for the world's poorest regions, those are not the most useful. And so what most people do, in fact, is use these heat retaining baskets, simple baskets with cloth inside and then a tight lid. Here's one on the left from Kenya and the one on the right from Nepal. How much do they cost? Some can be made from recycled materials and practically are free. As you'll recall, the first one that I showed you is made out of cardboard and aluminum foil. Other household models can cost in the tens to hundreds of dollars, but again, they vary drastically based on their quantity and where they're produced, etc. So what are the other uses for solar cooking? In fact, this is a critical one, is water pasteurization. And as you can see in the middle of the slide there's this little thing here, and it's actually a little test tube that's filled with wax. And then it's attached to a wire. And what those women did was they took the wire and they hung the test tube over the pot with the test tube in the water. And then when the wax melts, as you can see at the bottom here, the melting point is at 65 degrees Celsius. Well, what else is at 65 degrees Celsius? It kills all these really nasty microbes, and your water is pasteurized. It's a phenomenally efficient tool. So what else can solar cooker be used for? It is food processing, food drying, as I said, pasteurizing water. One of our global advisors, in fact, in Bolivia, uses solar cooking to roast coffee beans. So why solar cooking? There's a laundry list, as you can see, from zero fuel costs. Obviously, the sun is free. It's essential. There's no pollution. There's no emissions. There's no inhaling of smoke. And as you can see, one thing that's really important is the time that women can spend doing other tasks, whether it's micro enterprises or farming or looking after their family or getting an education. It's all just phenomenal ripple effects in terms of benefits. In fact, solar cooking addresses all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But let me take a moment to focus on what I think are the two most critical benefits: women's health and environmental health. According to the WHO, 2.6 billion people, mostly women, cook over open fires, burning wood, animal waste, charcoal, breathing in smoke and soot for hours every day. Smoke from cooking, in fact, over an open fire poses higher health risks than malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS combined. The WHO estimates about almost 3 to 8 million people die prematurely from household air pollution from cooking. According to the WHO, 27% die of pneumonia and ischemic heart disease, 20% from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, 18% from strokes, 8% from lung cancer. The consequences for pregnant women are even worse. You have stillbirths, infant mortality, low birth rate, preterm delivery, poor lung maturation. And for children are also at very high risk from indoor smoke pollution. Studies have found it leads to reduced lung function, a variety of respiratory infections, impaired mental and motor development, behavior disorders, childhood cancers, and many of which, of course, lead to lifelong health consequences. What are the other consequences? Imagine carrying those bundles of wood on your head. Those are upwards of 60 plus pounds. So all the musculoskeletal injuries that are involved in that. And then, of course, you have scalding and burning and the children who are playing near the fire who can easily get burnt themselves. Accidental poisoning, liquid fuel is being put into recycled bottles, so soda containers, for example, and someone can accidentally drink that, and obviously with dire consequences. And then I've spoken about the time loss, particularly for the women that spend most of their day focused on cooking when they could be doing other much more productive things. And then, of course, you have the climate impacts. All the fuel that is used releases tremendous amounts of CO2. According to the World Health Organization, cooking with polluting fuels is responsible for approximately 2% of human-created greenhouse gas emissions and more than half of all black carbon emissions, which is particularly damaging as its warming capacity can be up to 1,500 times greater than carbon dioxide. And then, of course, there's deforestation. One solar cooker can save a family from burning 1 ton of wood a year. Now, think about that and extrapolate that to the over 2.6 billion people that are cooking over open fires, many of them cooking with firewood. More than half of the deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa is attributable to trees cut for firewood and charcoal. In Kenya, only 6% of the land is still forested. Let me also add the consequences of using dung, the removal of which deprives the soil of nutrients, leading obviously to very poor harvests. Finally, the good news. As you can see from this slide, much of the poorest regions of the world are also the ones that are richest in the sun. We estimate that there are now over 4 million solar cookers being used today. That means over 5.8 million tons of CO2 emissions prevented in 1 year, the equivalent of taking off more than 1.25 million cars off the road. Over 30 million tons of CO2 is prevented over the lifetime of these cookers, the equivalent of not burning over 34 billion pounds of coal or driving over 76 billion miles. So as you can see, there is a huge positive environmental impact. And while solar cooking is empowering for families, it also saves countries tremendous amounts of money through avoided health and environmental costs. If everyone currently cooking with polluting fuels used solar cookers just a quarter of the time, it is estimated over $1 trillion could be saved annually around the world. Now, I really wanted to be able to click in and show you what you can do with this map, but I'm not technologically savvy enough to do so. So if you go up on our website, you can go to this map and you can actually click on also those orange dots and it will show you all the different projects that are happening in each of those countries. So how to engage in the solar cooking movement? Solar Cookers International is really the portal to the solar cooking movement. We're an NGO with over 30 years experience in the solar cooking sector. Our mission is to improve human and environmental health by supporting the expansion of effective carbon-free solar cooking in the world's regions of greatest need. We focused on distributing the simple cardboard cookers you saw earlier and partnering with organizations in a few countries. That was not a sustainable strategy for an organization based in Sacramento, California. But we did learn that there was no central organization, a hub, if you like, to support the growing solar cooking movement. So that is the role we now play. We do this through advocacy, research, and building the capacity of communities to adopt solar cooking. So let me begin with capacity building. We are the largest network of solar cooking organizations, promoting collaboration, education, and sharing of best practices. Pre-COVID, we brought people together through conferences and networking events, and probably like all of you, we have now switched to lots of webinars. We connect our global advisors and partners to new groups exploring developing similar projects, building and strengthening relationships between solar project directors around the world. A critical aspect of our capacity building is providing educational materials. Our John Colentine Solar Cooking Toolkit contains a wealth of information about solar cooking and how to start solar cooking projects. It is geared for multiple audiences and serves multiple purposes arranged into these user-friendly modules. It is equally effective for a novice solar cook looking for information on how to cook their first dish, or for the Prime Minister of Energy seeking information to scale up the adoption of solar cooking in their country. So the Solar Cooking Wiki is a wealth of helpful knowledge with almost 800 pages of information about best practices, including 142 country-specific solar cooking information and who to connect with. So again, unfortunately, given my technological inability, I was going to give you a tour of the wiki, but you can click on the wiki, and then you can click on a country. We have, as I said, 142, and in that you will see a whole table of contents of all the projects, who you need to connect with, who's funding solar cooking in that country, what the status of solar cooking is in that country, etc. If you're going to do this, you're going to have to set yourself several hours. There's just awesome amount of information in there. If you want to know the best solar cooker to buy for your region and purposes, you have to consider the climate, the durability, the portability. You can find out the keys to designing a really good solar cooking project. As I'm sure you all know, just dropping off a new technology in a community is a recipe for failure. Critical to the adoption is the engagement from the beginning of key community leaders, particularly women who are often the informal leaders. But I want to sort of make a really important note. Solar cooking is a new way of cooking, so that requires changing long-standing traditions. So don't have unrealistic expectations. Full adoption will be slow. The quick needs assessment helps you assess the need and desire for solar cooking in a community. The assessment is a critical and foundational step in creating a successful solar cooking initiative. The survey seeks answers regarding what is important to current cooks about the types of stoves currently in use, if their drinking water needs to be made safe to drink, what fuels are currently being used, is cooking done indoors or outdoors, why are people interested in solar cooking, and if people are interested in receiving solar cooking training. The compiled data can help planners, project managers, and decision makers formulate the appropriate solar cooking initiative for their community. In the end, it's really important to remember, if the benefits don't outweigh the challenges of using existing cooking practices, it will be very hard to get the women to adopt solar cooking. Working with our partners, we've developed many high-quality tools to help collaborations gather valid data. The development of evaluation tools is an important part of collecting consistent and impactful data, contributing to evidence-based results for solar cooking and supporting the successful adoption of solar cookers. We also continue our involvement in a couple of key projects, which has helped us learn lessons and then be able to share those lessons learned with the field. One of the largest is at Kakuma refugee camp. And to sort of give you a sense of how much solar cookers cost and then to bring them to the camp, We recently worked with a local solar cooking expert whom we have a longstanding relationship with in Nairobi to provide 40 additional solar cookers for Kakuma, bringing up the number of solar cookers we provided there to 126. The cost per oven that serves 6 people, as you can see the ovens there on the right, including training, follow-up, maintenance, etc., is about $400 per oven. That figure can be broken down to $40 a year over the 10-year lifetime of a cooker. And the price per cooker per person fed, we estimate, 6 to 7 people per cooker, would be about $6.83 per person per year. As you can see, it's extraordinarily economical and far, far cheaper than purchase fuel, especially for the refugees who have so little income to begin with. And here are some of the foods that are cooked with the solar cookers in Kakuma. Now let me turn to research. SCI has been leading the effort in the solar cooker sector to develop standards for household cookers. Our research specialists developed the performance evaluation process, or PEP test, which measures the thermal performance in watts. We are now working with our partners and with the International Organization for Standardization on the development of testing methods for institutional solar cookers and solar steam cooker systems. Standardization is key to innovations and creating a sustainable and profitable solar cooking industry. We have 4 testing centers around the world, one in California and New York, one in Nepal and Kenya. So every solar cooker that we test is tested at each of the centers so that we know that it works in very different altitudes and under very different conditions. As I mentioned, testing is key because we need to standardize the products. And it also helps consumers and project planners know what are the best solar cookers that they need to buy for the particular conditions that they're in. It's also unbiased, scientific, and replicable. You can see here the PEP results for the most popular solar cookers. And, it depends if you're looking to cook for a lot of people or quickly, you might want a star flour. If you have just cooking needs like I do, I have the Haynes 1, and it cooks sweet potatoes great. It cooks apples and all sorts of things. And I often cook my dinner in it during the summer. We also promote the testing to manufacturers as a way to show that their products are sound because they have a PEP rating. So if you like the solar cooking good housekeeping seal of approval. And advocacy, really critical piece, is the essential component is organizing advocacy efforts with our partners in international forums with international organizations and governments to support the adoption of solar cooking throughout the world's poorest regions. That's why it's important that the SCI has consultative status with the United Nations. And this is really where a lot of you, I'm sure, can play a really important role. As you can see, there's a lot of work to be done. At the rate we are currently going, over a quarter of the world's population will still not have access to clean cooking by 2030. This is where you come in, and which I'll get to in a minute. An important advocacy tool we've created is our solar impact summaries for almost 100 countries for which there is data available. The solar cooking impact summaries show the number of solar cookers currently identified in each country, the percentage of the population in each country relying on polluting fuels to cook. The summaries also show the carbon dioxide tons avoided with those current cookers and the potential carbon dioxide tons avoided if the families with solid fuels were switched to solar cooking only a quarter of the time. So that's just a quarter of the time, not even all the time. And as you can see, the estimated savings for each country can reach into the billions of dollars annually. These statistics are invaluable to use when seeking partnerships and support for solar cooking projects in individual countries. An important part of our advocacy has been focused on getting clean cooking and solar cooking included in countries' nationally determined contributions. which are submitted in accordance with the Paris Agreement for the United Nations Framework on Climate Change. In April, which we updated then in October, we published this important tool for advocates of clean cooking, and you can see we did an analysis of every country's NDC and what they said, or in fact, did not say, which is more the norm. So as you can see, 128 countries had made no mention of solar cooking. 41 mentioned cooking in cook stoves. 25 actually stated an interest in non-polluting cooking fuels. And one country, Somalia, actually mentioned solar cookers specifically. So what can you do? Help spread the word. Educate friends and colleagues about solar cooking. Are you in a position, or do you know people in positions to educate government officials about solar cooking? I am sure, knowing who we are, that many of you are in such positions. For those in countries with extensive international aid programs, is solar cooking being supported as part of their aid efforts? For example, we are currently consulting on a project in Yemen being financed by the German government. Are you working with environmental organizations and coalitions, groups focused on sustainable development, international aid groups, to name a few? And again, I'm sure that many of you have contacts or you yourselves are working in these very fields. So help advocate for the inclusion of solar cooking in their efforts. And really importantly, provide financial support to projects in countries or regions that you are interested in. More funding is key for scaling solar cooking. And finally, a shameless plug, support Solar Cookers International. Join our association. It's only $40 annually for individuals, and you'll have access to even more information and regular webinars. Here's a slide where you can contact us, and I'm sure it'll be available. Magda can make it available to you all. So let me conclude with what others are saying about solar cooking. Oh, and a slide I forgot about the consultancy services that we also provide. So what others are saying. Really exciting news, the Global Warming Mitigation Project recently highlighted the importance of solar cooking and its significance potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions when it named Solar Cookers International as one of the 10 2021 Keeling Curve Prize laureates, recognizing it as, quote, one of the most impactful climate projects around the world. We've recently started doing a lot of work with the World Bank, which now has a clean cooking fund, which we're very excited about that development. And Yabi Zhang recently said, solar cooking is a renewable solution with no emissions. Once you have a solar cooker, there is no need to use fuels. There is no need for operation costs. And finally, we're going to try this, hopefully it works, is a clip from one of the trainers at Kakuma refugee camp. So I'm going to click on that, get it started.
With regard to the solar cooker, our students have seen the new technology, and majority of them are acknowledging that it is a solution to Kakuma operations. And like for the female ladies, they are like, this one, we must have it. It will help us to kind of reduce us moving up and down to fetch firewood. It will reduce many risks, but majority of them, maybe when they go outside there to fetch firewood, they encounter problems. You see, we have issues of SGBV and things like that. And if actually this is at home, it will help them reduce all this. By the end of the day, it is clean. We have testified, we have seen the food, we are taking it. I'm going to share with my friends. For me, I think this is the way to go for Kakuma as far as cooking energy is concerned.
See, and with that, let me get you all on the screen here. And with that, I am open to questions. Let's see, I'll stop sharing my screen here. there we go.
Thank you very much, Ruth. What great insights, a lot of food for thought, so to speak. Wonderful presentation. Apologies in case you're not seeing many of us on screen. I've had a message from one attendee who said the fact that a lot of people are on camera is affecting her internet connection. So she wasn't able to fully enjoy your talk. So thank you to many attendees for going off camera for the time being. That being said, if you would like to ask a question or engage in this part of the conversation, please do feel free to turn your camera back on for that time. Thank you so much.
I would also add not only questions and comments, but if you have experiences with solar cooking, please share those as well. I can see somebody PB. Very happy to hear. I am working on a project to distribute solar cookers in a refugee camp in Zimbabwe. Terrific. However, I've done research looking for a solar cooker, but haven't found one. Okay. The organization listed in the wiki are not reachable. Is there any way I could get a hold of one supplier? Yes, and if you could somehow send me an email. And Magda, I guess I'm not allowed to say it over. Anyway,
I'll be happy to serve as the point of liaison. So Prince, if you received an email from us, there should have been an email address. I'll also paste that email address in the chat in just a moment. So feel free to get in touch and I'll be more than happy to liaise between you and Ruth.
And also, one reason that their information might not be on our wiki is that we actually rely on people to, if they become an associate member, then they can post all their information on the wiki and they can even have a page on the wiki. So perhaps you're not part of the association. So let me see.
Ruth, I see that David has his hand up. His
okay.
Hand up. So David, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, thanks, Ruth. A very interesting presentation. I'm glad to learn about the organization. So my question, I have kind of a two-part question. One is, I first learned about solar cookers when my daughter was actually doing, it was about 15 years ago when my daughter was doing a high school report on solar cookers. And, as you said, it sounds like your organization's been around for some decades now. I wonder if you could go into a little more depth into sort of where you see the greatest opportunities for expanding solar cooking are and why you see the opportunities there. And similarly, you mentioned a couple of the reasons that it kind of isn't already everywhere, but if you can kind of talk a little bit more directly about what you sort of see as the main barriers that need to be overcome. So that's one question. And then
that's two. So let me
okay, maybe it's two. All right, I don't want to hog things.
Let me try to remember both of them. So the first is obviously the most important part and where we would love for everybody to get engaged is to get solar cooking into the nationally determined contributions in the Paris climate. And so that you have countries that are actually committed to doing this, which means they're committed to also funding it. And I know at the last COP meeting, there was a lot of talk about deforestation, which obviously is a perfect segue into the importance of including solar cookers. So we've been working really hard at that. We'd love to have more partners with that. And one way we can do that is there are lots of coalitions all around the world working on, obviously on climate change and then on women's health and sustainable development. And if we can get as many of those organizations as possible to include the advocacy of solar cooking into their work, that obviously would be huge. Then the second question obviously is funding. It's terrific that the World Bank is providing money, but wouldn't it be amazing if every aid organization that is, like for example, in the States, we have USAID, that they had a major solar cooking element as part of their international aid and could then provide it. One thing that's really critical, though, as I said in the beginning, is you can't just drop off this new technology and assume it's going to be adopted. So you really have to work with local communities, you have to work with local organizations and help them adopt the solar cooking, provide the financing. And then what's really exciting, and which I didn't have a chance to mention, is that there are all kinds of programs all over the world and projects where youth are being taught how to make solar cookers. And then adopt them. There's a great program in Haiti for it's a young woman's organization, and they're making solar cookers and using them and then going into their communities and showing them how effective they are. And I think that was sort of amalgam of both your questions, but I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, did you have a follow-up question?
Well, I see there's some other comments. I mean, I do have a follow-up question. So I was actually at COP26, and one of the exhibitors gave me this.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with it? Which is like, you know, another way. It's not a solar cooker thing, but it's another way of addressing many of the issues you talked about, particularly around wood fires and you know, that particular thing is essentially an you know, locally made insulator for pots that keeps them warm. So I'm wondering, from the perspective of solar cooking, whether or not you see these as being complementary, or they're really not really that relevant given the nature of some of the solar cookers and the way cooking happens.
Oh, you know, certainly anything that helps keep the food warm is relevant. And there's this new technology that's just being developed. It's called sun buckets, where it actually cooks the food in a solar way, but then is built in a way that it actually also keeps the food very warm and for hours. And those are slowly being introduced as well. So there's just all kinds of technological innovations that are happening, which is very exciting, and certainly lends itself to inventors who say, well, how can I capture the light of the sun more effectively and more efficiently? And it's happening all over the world.
Thank you.
Marco,
just to interject here really quickly, I just wanted to read out a lovely comment from one of UWC Atlantic parents, Ruth, also. I run an off-grid campsite and am buying solar cookers for this season in the UK, looking at Go Sun products as they seem super efficient for the lack of sun that we have. She will promote SCI to all users. Well done. I had no idea that you were there. Fantastic environmental win. Just wanted to make sure that we highlight this lovely comment to our guest speaker. And before I turn to Octavio, in case Octavio, you might wish to ask your question live, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you do have personal experiences using solar cookers, as per Ruth's earlier question, we would love to hear from you. Octavio, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to read? I'll give a few moments.
Hi, yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, perfect. Okay, yeah, so I was just wondering whether you also sell carbon credits, because I know some improved cook stoves projects, for example, in Kenya, and they basically fund themselves by selling carbon credits, which are then verified by like big verification companies, like, for example, Gold Standard or Vera. And I was just wondering whether the because I think the solar cooker is much more efficient than the improved cook stoves projects, and I was wondering whether you also are in the carbon credit business, basically.
We'd like to be, but it's very, very expensive to, in fact, get credited. And so we've explored that several times. And in fact, if you became a member of our association, there's a really interesting webinar on how one does get into the carbon credit business. But we are not at this point, unfortunately. But if you want to just informally offset some of your carbon, you're always welcome to join Solar Cookers International, or send us a contribution and feel good that you are in fact offsetting it, but it's not official.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot for the answer. I might get back to you via email or something. It sounds very interesting.
Please do. Please.
Thanks for the presentation.
Marco, I see that you have your hand raised, so over to you.
Yes, thank you, Magda, and gracias, Ruth. Wonderful to see you and to receive your presentation. Thanks for preparing it. I have no idea whatsoever about solar cookers myself, but listening to the presentation, I wonder, well, this seems like a no-brainer. Huh?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't more people simply use solar cookers? And maybe I lost part of your presentation, but what is it that would not forbid, but diminish the incentive for anybody to use a solar cooker? Is it time? Does it take far more time to boil sweet potatoes, which actually my wife likes very much? It's not my favorite dish though, but
it would become your favorite dish if you cooked it by solar. There is, in fact, I mean, I actually didn't start solar cooking, I will admit, until this year, although I've been on the board for a long time, because, and here's why people don't adopt solar cooking so quickly, particularly in the Western world. Yep. So I have a lot of trees in my yard, and which means that I have to keep moving my cooker. And if I'm working, I'm not home to move my cooker. So I couldn't really do that until I retired. And now if I'm cooking a dish for a couple of hours, you know, every hour or so, I can move it. Sweet potatoes only take an hour, so you don't necessarily have to move it. The other challenge is, you know, we all like to, if I want to eat something, I want to cook quickly. And now, of course, in the Western world, we have microwaves. You can quickly put something on a stove. And so it does take time. And then in the world's poorest regions where, in fact, it's super important, as again, cooking over a fire is a long-standing tradition. It's a habit, and habits are hard to change. People might say, but you know what? I want to have a hot meal at night. So what do? I can't be cooking at 6 o'clock at night if the sun is down. I want to take 45 minutes. I don't want it to take all day. So you have to think about, so culturally, what are the foods that lend themselves to solar cooking? My kind of solar cooker and solar box cookers lend themselves to stews and beans and rice dishes, which of course are all over the world. And you know, and then the challenge is for people, where do I find the information? How do I fund it? That's why we really want to encourage that governments, aid organizations really support and fund solar cooker projects. And then that has to be maintained, right? You have to develop a training program in the country. Very important. It really has to be done and led by people in country, in communities. So training programs are really important, support programs. We had a woman who's now on our global advisors who was given a solar cooker, and we went to visit her. We were told by a project she had a solar cooker, but it was sitting in her backyard, and you know, she couldn't remember how she was supposed to use it, and it had dust, etc. So we connected her with a training program, and now she runs a restaurant, all with solar cookers in Haiti. So training is just a vital piece of the puzzle.
Thank you.
Thanks. And again, congrats, Ruth.
Oh,
wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I can see that we have one hand raised. Just before I hand over, I wanted to encourage, if anyone has any last minute question, there might be time for 1 or 2 more questions after this one. So please either raise your hand or post your question in the chat, and we'll turn over to you. For now, I can see there's a UWCA USA alumna who would like to ask her question. So please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Magda. My name is Scarlett Cantini. I'm from Dominican Republic. And I was just wondering, so I work with energy and water infrastructure development, and so I'm quite familiar with solar cookers. to me, or I would say in the development field, solar cookers are kind of seen as a way to give access to those who don't necessarily have access to cooking. And there's kind of like a direct association with poverty. And so listening to your talk, which was really good, it occurred to me, you know, is this an option that could be more widespread that doesn't necessarily have to be associated with poverty, but, you know, you could have someone from, you know, middle class, upper class, using solar cooking. I imagine that there's like a lot of technical issues, like, you know, fire hazards and stuff. But I was just wondering if that's ever been kind of a consideration, or, you know, what are the odds that?
Well, actually, I will correct that. There are some very vibrant solar cooking communities all around the States, for example. I don't know about Europe. And no fire hazards. That's the wonderful thing about solar cooking. You just have it outside and the food doesn't even burn. And so here in Sacramento, actually, we have a lot of people who are solar cooking. And there are all kinds, as I said, of solar cooking devices that people can use. Lots of people use solar cooking for camping. And I saw there was in the chat a reference about camping. But again, for our purposes, you know, the West doesn't need it. So we really are focused on how do we make sure that we make solar cooking available and advocate for the adoption of solar cooking in the world's poorest regions, because that's where it does the most benefit. Everybody else, it's kind of fun. It's a great hobby. And as I said, solar cooked meals, there's something about them. They just, you go away and go, oh my God, that was cooked by the sun. But it's not really, in terms of spending time and resources, the key is how do we address climate change? How do we address women's health? How do we address deforestation? And all that is through the promotion of the adoption of solar cooking in the world's poorest regions.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody who's been engaged in a solar cooker project who would like to talk about that?
I can see a couple questions from Talia. Talia, unless you, I can see you on mute, I'm happy to read out your questions. Just giving a few moments. Talia, who is our current student, really enjoyed the presentation, and she says it was wonderful to hear such an environmentally friendly solution to many issues. How long does it take to help a community adopt solar cookers from the very beginning of the process to it being used in most households in the community? Do you have an example of this implementation process?
It can take a couple of years. So, for example, the most important thing, and depending on what community you're looking at, is there an organization, a community organization that already exists that would be willing to expand to adopt solar cooking? And then you have to identify who are the leaders in the community. And really importantly for people who do any kind of grassroots organizing, you really need to find who are the informal leaders who are super influential. Often they're the women. And you identify a couple of those women, you bring them together, you introduce the technology to them. And as I said, and I showed you, we also have, then we have these assessments. So you can do a survey to find out what are the needs of the community. You can't go in front of the community. It's really, really important for long-term sustainable adoption to make sure that there's really real buy-in from leaders within the community. And then what happens is that you have sort of the key women. There's always sort of first adopters, if you like, and those first adopters will try it out, give it a feel, find out, oh my God, look, this, I frees my time, it frees my children's time. My children can go to school now instead of helping to go get firewood. And so once the benefits are realized, and that's really important, are the benefits better than what you're currently doing. And once those benefits are realized, then you have more and more adopters. So by the second year, you might have several women. And then by the third year, it's really adopted throughout the community, and it sort of becomes, as you saw in Kakuma, the thing to do. But the adoption, the faster the adoption is reliant on, so what are the benefits to me? And if I realize very quickly, I don't have to go into the forest, I'm not going to get raped, I don't have to be breathing the smoke, there's all this time now that I can spend on other things. When you realize those benefits, that just accelerates the adoption process.
Thank you very much to all who joined us today, and to you, Ruth, for such a fantastic talk, and for inspiring us all and enlightening, I suppose, about the uses, multiple uses of solar cookers. To those of you who would like to review the presentation and the content that we had today, the recording of today's talk will be made available on the college's YouTube channel tomorrow. Also, just to let you know that our next event is planned for the 3rd of February, and will feature Ottar Björnstad from class of ATL 8, who is an epidemiologist. So we hope to see many of you return to our Atlantic Circle InConversation talk. Let us know what you thought about today's event by completing a short online feedback form, a link to which I posted in the chat, and I will also be emailing it to you shortly. For now, thank you so much once again, Ruth, for this excellent presentation, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, and send me an email if you need more information.